Hey, this is Dr. Priyanka Venugopal, and you're listening to the Unstoppable Mom Brain Podcast, episode 59, Committing in a Group Coaching Program with Dr. Julie Whittington. Today on the podcast, I am bringing one of my lovely longtime clients, Julie Whittington. She is a physician and a working mom of two kids. And I have to tell you, she's going to be sharing some of her story that I think is going to be incredibly impactful for all of you to hear. She's going to share where she was before she joined Unstoppable and a lot of what she created in this group. I think that her sharing her real experiences, she's going to even be sharing how she got annoyed with me. We're going to have a good laugh together. I can't wait for you guys to listen. She also shares the difference between telling herself to be committed versus actually feeling commitment in her body. It is the difference that really led her to skyrocket results, for her to start feeling a shift and for her to really start feeling success towards the goals that she had. So I cannot wait for you to hear her story and really hear her real lived experience being in this group. Before we get into the conversation, I also want to make sure you know that enrollment for the next Unstoppable group is opening this Sunday on May 21st at 9 a.m. Eastern. I want to make sure that you know about this so that it's marked and on your calendars. You can join the waitlist over at the unstoppablemombrain.com/group. And the reason that you want to join the waitlist is because spots in this group are capped and limited to maintain the intimate nature of this group, which means that the consult calls leading up to this group are also going to be limited and filled on a first come, first served basis. When you're on the waitlist, you're going to get all of the details emailed to you first. You're going to have all the details for exactly how to join so that you get access on day one, which is Sunday, May 21st. Make sure you join the waitlist over at the unstoppablemombrain.com/group. Now let's get into the conversation with Dr. Julie Whittington. Hello, hello. Welcome, Dr. Julie Whittington. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. We are going to be having you introduce yourself in just a second. But to everyone listening, Julie is one of my dear, dear, dear clients from the Unstoppable group. And I cannot wait for you to share your story and where you were, how you experienced Unstoppable, and just all of the fun things. So, Julie, I've already introduced you once, but tell us all a little bit about you and how you even discovered the world of coaching.
Sure. So thanks for having me on. I think it's an interesting feeling to feel like you're kind of being highlighted in your coaching process.
Mhm.
So I will be as open about it as I can. I am 49. I am a rehab physician. Um, I have been married for 22 years. I have two kids, a 17 and 15-year-old. Um, and I'm a full time working mom who feels like I've been kind of struggling with weight for I really feel like it's been most of my life, most of my definitely adult life, and probably kind of starting in my teenage years. And I have been coaching with you. I did some coaching prior to Unstoppable. And I really feel like it was a sort of bridge to kind of before coaching weight loss and then after coaching. And they're different experiences.
Yeah. So you were saying that, you started to struggle with just the idea of your weight in your teenagers. Can you tell us about how did it start? Like how your story with your weight struggle started?
I actually see a lot of similarities in like the patterns that I followed compared to your story.
Mm.
So I was very athletic as a kid. I played multiple sports. I don't ever remember feeling overweight when I was little. And then I think in probably like middle school, high school, I was still a very healthy weight when I look back, but that was the time when I started to really compare myself with other people and their body shapes and um, kind of how I looked compared to them.
Mm.
And so that's when I think it kind of became um, in my mind that I was conscious and aware of my weight.
Mm.
And then I played sports all through high school. And I would say my weight was probably pretty stable through high school. I felt like I was overweight when I look back at the numbers. I don't think I was. I think I may have gone to Weight Watchers like with my mom maybe
Mm.
one time in high school.
Mm.
And it was like very small amounts of weight, but I just remembered like really focusing on my food, and that I went with my mom, I think was kind of telling as I've gone through this process of sort of my feelings about my weight related to my upbringing. And then in college, I stopped playing organized sports. I definitely gained some weight in college. And then I would say the big weight gain probably happened mostly after I had my first child.
Mm.
But that was kind of happening during residency. So I had my son in my last year of residency. And I, um, so then I feel like that's when the numbers were really creeping up.
Yeah. I definitely want to get to that, but I just want to kind of go back to that moment, like in high school, that you like became aware of your weight. And I wonder, like, do you remember how that felt for you? Like going to that first Weight Watchers meeting or like just becoming really aware of your food and probably, I really think about like young girls and teenagers that are already having some thoughts about their bodies and their bodies are changing and then what it looks like compared to other women or other girls really. And like, do you remember becoming conscious about your weight for the first time and how that felt for you?
I think it felt almost like an embarrassment,
Mhm.
and not so much shame as much as almost like guilt. Like I was doing something wrong that
Mhm.
led me to not have the same body shape, style, size as my friends who
Mm.
may not have had as many curves as I did, things like that. I just remember
Yeah.
like there being some feeling of me doing something wrong in
Mhm.
the way I looked.
Yeah, and I think that this is common probably for so many people that are listening. Like, what do you think that that does for a young person who's like trying to fit in to what society thinks is normal? Because now that's what you think you have to do.
I think it just puts your mindset in this constant position of trying to figure out how to make yourself better,
Mm.
worthy, valuable, subconsciously all of it.
Mm.
And then wherever you get positive feedback, this is all stuff I've learned since coaching, but that just reinforces it where I saw very much in myself like doing as well as I could in school, being the hardest working athlete, being like the most helpful at home, to
Mhm.
get feedback that did make me feel then like I was
Mm.
worthy. Um,
Yes. And that's like probably true for so many I mean, this is why we really talk about like in unstoppable high achievers. I feel like high achieving women, working moms have this lens of really wanting to strive to do well. And a lot of it, like what we've talked about, is fills this desire that we have to feel proud of ourselves or accomplished. We want to feel good about ourselves. And I wonder, I feel like weight loss is one piece of it, but like how many other things it starts to color and affect and like what is the impact of keeping that? What do you think it was for you? Like, because you were saying in med school and in residency when you had your first child, why do you think that that started to lead to the creep up for you?
so a couple of things I think. So when I was 29, so this was before I had my son, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that was kind of a shock, just all of the impact of being diagnosed, like considering the consequences. I think it really affected me, but I was in a really busy time of residency. So I just kind of shoved it down. And I was giving myself insulin injections. And I honestly, being a physician, one would think this would be very clear that insulin is a fat storage hormone. But when I got pregnant, your insulin needs increase in pregnancy, and I was really hyper focused on controlling my blood sugar, so I just like flooded myself with insulin so I could keep eating the way I wanted to
Mm.
and maintain good blood glucose control. And I gained it with that pregnancy, I gained 70 pounds. And I didn't really feel like it was a big deal as I was living it.
Right.
Um, but then after I had my son, I was kind of like, wow, that's going to take some work to
Mhm.
kind of get rid of. Um, and I think then sort of compounding it was the pressure of parenting. So, I'm still a doctor. I'm still trying to figure that all out. And then I'm trying to figure out how to be a mom. a good mom. And I think I was super critical of just like not knowing exactly how to do it. And then I would just, that made me want to make myself feel better. I just think it was this big cycle then. And then, I think all my life as a parent and full time working physician has been a balance of trying to do everything as perfectly as I could. And when I couldn't or didn't feel like I was, then I wanted to comfort myself in some way or reward myself, which I discovered through your coaching,
Mhm.
is a huge theme for why I would overeat.
Yeah. And I wonder, when you were saying that, because there's two areas I kind of want to explore. One is because you've had some thoughts. I remember we've even talked about your thoughts about having diabetes and insulin and blood sugar control and like being like, I'm a physician. I am literally an expert in understanding the physiology and the medicines, and especially as a rehab physician, where you see the downstream effects of having any kind of chronic medical diagnosis. I know you've had some thoughts on that, so I want to definitely touch on that. But before we get to that, you were saying that you gained the 70 pounds after your pregnancy. And then what happened after that? Like, did you keep gaining weight? Did you lose it? And if you did lose it, how did you lose it? Like, what was your journey after that in terms of your
It was
weight?
very Weight Watchers focused, and I
Okay.
did lose it. And
Yeah.
I remember for Braden, my son's first birthday, that I was maybe only like 10 or 12 pounds more than when I got pregnant. So I did, and
And
I
it worked
think that
well.
it
It
did.
worked.
It
Yeah.
did. Yes, it did. Weight Watchers, this is what I've done Weight Watchers more times than I can truthfully count. I've kept a
Hmm.
lot of my little booklets, so I go back and look at my weight.
Hmm.
And what I always would say when people would comment on my weight loss
Hmm.
was, it works great when I do it. And it did work great when I did it.
Yeah.
It was just not sustainable for me. And I mean, I lost weight so many times and I gained weight back so many times because I didn't really know how to solve a couple of key areas,
Hmm.
um, which I feel like have been um, ongoing. And the biggest result that I feel I've accomplished in your program is
Yeah.
feel like I have a handle on those areas now.
Mm. That's so good. Curious for you, like, what do you think is the missing piece that doesn't allow it to be sustainable? I'll share what I think, but like, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Why do you think Weight Watchers, it works, but it's not sustainable? Why?
For me, I think there are a couple of reasons. I had no interest in counting points and looking up stuff on an app for the rest of my life, and I would eventually
Mm,
just get tired of doing that. I
mhm,
think another really big deficit in Weight Watchers is that I didn't really understand why I overate. So then it was
mm,
just like this regimented plan of what to do to lose weight, which I did, but eventually I would lose the motivation, lose the willpower. And so then once those were gone, it was very difficult to keep doing it
mm,
and then still feel like I had this need that I wanted met and food could fill that need. So
mhm,
I think that was for me one of the issues. And then I think one of the other really big issues that came later, because I've done Weight Watchers so long, was that it was very focused on um, kind of low fat. And
mm,
for me with diabetes, that did not work well. And as I learned how I responded to eating, you know, less carbs and sort of a restricted flour and sugar and higher good fats, I realized that like it was counterintuitive to everything that was good for my body. So I sort of abandoned it for that reason too.
yeah. And I think that like, those are the two, especially the first 2 points that you made. I think that that's what we really address in coaching, which I want to get to also, like really understanding why do we ever overeat? And I feel like it's such a simple question sometimes, but it's not, because I don't think that we've really truly answered the question again, especially high achievers. Because this is the thing I always say again and again, right? So, high achieving working moms, you're smart, you're capable, you have capacity to learn. We have actual evidence of this being true. And yet, we don't know why we overeat, really. The answers we come up with is, oh, I'm not disciplined. I just like don't know how to say no. I'm not like, I'm kind of lazy. That's just not even true. We have so much evidence to the contrary. And I think that, when we don't address the real reason why are we ever overeating, we can never solve for it. We start chasing the wrong solution. And I think that that's the trouble with counting points and calories. While it might work really well for some people, if we don't address why am I overeating to begin with, we can never address it. We count more, restrict more, and eventually it's going to give up. When you think about like your journey, you tried Weight Watchers, it worked until it would stop working because you didn't address like why you were overeating. You didn't want to count points forever. What was your next step? Did you keep doing that for many, many years, or did you just find coaching early on? What was your journey into discovering coaching?
I did Weight Watchers for a lot of years, and I was still paying for Weight Watchers when I started coaching. And I
Mm,
was paying for Weight Watchers, but I had gotten to the point where I was thinking, this is not good for my diabetes, and I'm not losing weight consistently.
mm,
I have to do something different. I don't honestly even recall how. I think I found coaching through a podcast in the same way you did. I mean,
yes.
I think I started listening to it at the very beginning,
Mm,
and it just really it connected with me, and I listened to a lot of the podcasts for a while before signing up for coaching because I think I had just like kept thinking like, "Oh, I can do it by listening to the podcast." And so I
mm.
tried doing that for probably 6 months at
Okay.
least.
Yeah.
And then
How did that work for you?
I
Like, because I think
it
again, like
didn't.
smart, like, because we're again like smart, capable high achievers. I think we are notorious for that. Like, let me see if I can do this on my own. And it's valuable, right? To try that. But like, what was your experience of doing that?
I um, learned a lot and I implemented little.
Mm,
And um, and I think that the connection with actually having real coaching is something that you just unfortunately can't really get on a podcast. So
mhm,
it was markedly different once I started coaching.
mm,
And I quit Weight Watchers, and I learned a lot just about how my thinking impacts the decisions that I was making. I would say like in my first coaching experience before I joined Unstoppable, I did a lot of work on that.
mm,
I did lose a significant amount of weight.
mhm,
And then while I was still enrolled in that program, I gained the majority of it back.
mm,
And I remember in that process feeling incredibly frustrated.
mm,
And um, then I decided to, I did a couple of calls with you, consult calls with you, and I essentially felt like you just got it
mm,
when I had the consult call.
mm,
And I also saw my story felt very similar to the path that you followed. And I just really connected with like parenting struggles and
mm,
um, things like that. So um, when I when I joined Unstoppable, I remember vividly saying like, or you saying to me, you do deserve the outcome of what you're looking for and why you're overeating. Like I just remembered thinking like, that's really significant. I do
yeah,
deserve it.
yeah, yeah,
So I guess coaching, once I got to coaching, I think kind of the way that I've been losing weight has changed. I'm not doing Weight Watchers any longer, but
mm.
I feel like my thinking about weight loss is what has changed the most since I've been in your group.
Yeah. And I think that this is the biggest thing because I've shared this too. Like you find this podcast, you discover, wait a second, there is this missing piece. And I think the missing piece that we're referring to, tell me whether this is what you're referring to, is oh, like that desire to snack at night, the desire to treat myself, that desire is coming not because of anything other than the millions of thoughts that I'm having about my life. Right? Like why going back to what we were saying at the beginning, like why do we ever overeat? Why do we eat when we're not hungry? It's because we're having a million thoughts. Many of them we're unaware of about our mom life, about our work life, about our partners, about the food. And how come like my thin husband gets to eat 3 dinners and I don't? How come my kid is running off the bus? How come, how come, how come? And I think that, what discovering what this work does is, oh, wait a second, I have these millions of thoughts I'm not aware of. And that's why I'm having these emotions that's driving me to eat. And what I think is interesting, and I think this is important to highlight, I always want to share on this podcast that coaching is not a perfect practice. I think it's so important to highlight. I like to share real ups and downs. When you said, like, you lost a significant amount of weight and then you gained it back, why do you think you felt, because I know we've talked about this on that coaching call. Remember where I made that zigzag line?
Yeah.
Can you share that experience? Like, you gained weight back, and then what was it that led you to feel frustrated with yourself? And then what was the impact of holding on to the frustration? Because that's then when you joined Unstoppable. So I want to kind of highlight that.
Yeah. So the frustration, I think, came from still judging my results
Mm,
with not a very kind self-talk.
yeah.
And the frustration also came from really still using willpower and motivation energy to
Yes.
achieve results. And in coaching, it was discussed all the time. Like,
Mhm.
you can't white knuckle, you can't willpower your way through it. But I didn't understand what was missing. Like, how do I then not do that? And that I
Right.
really gained that in working with you, where I just didn't have any clarity around it before. So then what I would feel is just that I, just like my old thinking, I
Mhm.
was weak. I I just can't stick to anything I say I'm going to do. I always do this. Like, it was subtle. I wasn't like calling myself a fat pig, but I was like judging that I wasn't doing what I said I was going to do. And that's something I think that I've always done, but I especially did it there, which led to frustration. I was missing the piece where I needed to look at my results and do
Mhm.
it with kindness
Mhm.
and, you know, curiosity, where I have been taught that too, but somehow it just connected with me, with you in this most recent session.
Yeah, and I love that you're mentioning this. I'm curious whether this feels true for you, but like when you gain a couple of pounds back, like you lose weight and then you start gaining it back, and then you feel frustrated at your results, which is normal, right? Like, we will feel frustrated if we have a result we don't love. But I'm curious whether it was the frustration that you like. There's almost like that poked holes in your motivation, right? So you might have had motivation and excitement that comes from, like, oh, look, it's working. This is going to happen. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And then you have that result you don't love, and frustration just like it like zaps the motivation. And then it's like, how do you ever get that back? You're feeling so frustrated. All of a sudden, frustration just takes over the model, especially when we keep it. And then all what happens with that is we keep recreating those results. It gets worse and worse. And I think one of the biggest shifts you made, and I'd love to hear how you felt like you transitioned, was I remember even the coaching call that you talked about this, but the difference between motivation and commitment. We talk about this all the time, right? You cannot white knuckle through. You cannot keep using willpower to drive over your desire to eat. That's like motivation trying to like force you through, and that's not going to work. So, like, what did you do? Because you're like, how do you do this? How did you switch it, Julie? Tell us all the
I
secret answer to that.
What I wanted to just say I'm committed and have it be true, and that's
Ah,
not how it works. So,
right.
I really did I started doing, daily work where I
Mm,
answered those questions that you pose to us
yeah,
every day. I miss days here and there,
yeah.
but there's something about reminding myself why I'm doing it each
Mhm,
day. And
mhm,
it just over time, it just grew. And you had said it like in my first session with you, but I wasn't doing it, so I didn't really know. And
mm,
like in my prior program, the focus is doing like thought work, but I
mhm,
didn't focus it. I just like I I feel like there was something for me that helped in answering the same questions every day.
mhm.
um, I mean, I have to deal with emotions too, but that's sort of I do that separately than what I do
Mhm.
with daily work. And it just really over time did build that feeling of commitment. And
Yeah.
it feels different than motivation because the way you describe a feeling of commitment is so resonant with me
Mm.
as a mom. It's how I would not let my kids down. I don't want I want to be that same way with me too.
Mm.
It's not as easy, but this is
Mm.
helping.
Yeah. And, I think that it's important. Like, I love that you said like, "Oh, I'm committed," and like there, like we just hope that that's enough, and it's not. And I want to like kind of share the only reason that it's not is because we have these other thoughts that have been in the way. So we have been trained for so many decades to think that like the motivation or the plan, or if I just have a really perfect strategy, then that's where my commitment's going to come from. And I think what you had to learn, and this is kind of like why coaching happens in layers. You have to kind of uncover what are the obstacles away that are in the way for me to feel commitment. And the way that I describe, if anyone's new to this podcast or anyone's new to Unstoppable, the way that I describe commitment is I really think about like, your future self at her ideal weight is just waiting for you at the bus stop, just like your child is waiting for you at the bus stop. And I feel like we would never, ever, ever, ever leave our child waiting at the bus stop. Like, even if we were at work, even if something came up, we would figure out a way to pick them up, even if we don't feel like it. I think that's the key. And I think that maybe
Yeah.
that's what resonates with moms that are listening. Like, even if it's raining, even if you were busy in the middle of work, even if you were like doing something else and you don't feel like picking your kid up, you don't ever leave them there. And I think, especially for women, working moms who are used to prioritizing their work, their partners, their kids, their laundry, and they kind of have forgotten to prioritize themselves. I think that that is the muscle that we just have to discover. And I think that it takes really seeing it clearly that you haven't been prioritizing yourself. You've been letting these other things kind of take precedent as opposed to being like, wait a second, I deserve, it's kind of going back to I deserve to get picked up at the bus stop too.
Yeah. I remember you saying at one point just that you know, your priorities of sort of organizing your time need to reflect what's important in life. And when I looked at that from like the initial portion of working with you, like me in there was a really sliver of time.
So if you like looked
So
at your calendar and you saw like how much time does Julie get, it was a sliver. Where was your time
it was.
going? Like, and I feel like this is a lot of working moms. Like, where do you think if you took an inventory of your time and your bandwidth, where was it going?
I mean, when I was at work, it was solely on work.
Mm-hmm.
And then my kids, my husband,
Mm-hmm.
plans, anybody outside of like my extended family, friends, kind of anybody but me, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then like the shift, I think that that's interesting, right? Because we start to see, okay, like here it is that I want this awesome result. I want to lose weight or any big goal that anyone has, but like, where is it on my calendar? Where am I prioritizing it? So like, how did you start to create, instead of a small sliver, like a bigger slice of the pie for your time and calendar? How did you start to prioritize that?
I think even just committing myself to doing
Mhm.
the daily work every day was not a huge chunk of time, but it was a commitment that I am keeping no
Yeah.
matter what. And if things got busy, I would just basically say, I can get home later.
Mhm.
Sean, my husband can handle things until I get home because I'm doing this for me now. And then I think another big part that I kind of factored in was rest and not feeling bad about it, where in the past I would feel like, oh, I haven't like hung out with my family enough,
Mhm.
and I would stay up later. And so I think that was maybe another big area. I don't really calendar things, so it's
Mhm.
more mental in terms
Yeah.
of fitting time for myself, but that's how I felt like I did it.
Do you feel like when you prioritized more rest for you and even just like, the 10 to 15 minutes maybe that you take for the daily work, did it take away from the other parts of your life? I think that's the
It
big
did not.
fear, right? That's the big fear. If I prioritize myself and put rest on the calendar or some time to journal for myself or whatever it is for us, like it's going to take away from something else. What was your experience of prioritizing yourself and how it impacted how you showed up with other things?
I think that if anything, I probably showed up better.
Mm.
There definitely was some guilt to work through, and that was something, that I had to learn just by examining my feelings about it. But no one else sensed that there was anything lacking by me taking that time for myself.
Yeah, which is so important. I feel like, we
Yeah,
have such a story around, if I take time for myself, somebody else is losing. And I think that that just kind of goes to like how all or nothing we are. Like, if I take time for me, it's like a math equation rather than like, wait, there's maybe space for both. And actually, how we show up in such a different way as moms, as a wife, as a physician, like in your workplace, when you are actually taking time for yourself, which I think so many working moms don't realize. And so I just
right.
want to like pivot for a second. When you felt frustrated, so you gained weight back, you felt frustrated, how did you get yourself willing to try it again? To to do like you discovered Unstoppable. Tell us, how did you discover Unstoppable? And then what was it that led you to be like, you know what? I know I'm frustrated. I'm not living my result, but like, let's go. Okay, fine. I'm ready to do this.
Yeah, I heard you on the Weight Loss for Doctors Only podcast.
Mm,
And I and then I think sort of started following, like I got on your email, and it was kind of in a time where I had gained the weight back in my previous program and was feeling very frustrated. And I felt like I honestly felt the way I felt in Weight Watchers. I felt like, oh, this worked when I did it, but now I'm not doing it anymore. And like there would be all of these worksheets that I could fill out or these, and I kept feeling like I'm just looking for what I need to like
mhm,
flip my switch.
mhm.
And I kept kind of connecting the way that the messaging was presented in your emails. It just really connected and made sense to how I think. And
Mhm,
so then I set up a consult call with you.
mhm.
And that's kind of how I started doing Unstoppable.
Yeah. And I think that this is again so common, which I love that you're highlighting it. Like when you think about the past, right? And all the things that you have tried, whether it's Weight Watchers, maybe even a different coaching experience or anything, right? Like if you have wanted to lose weight for a while, likely you have tried things. And if you have wanted to lose weight for a while and you don't have results, likely you have many fails. Like you have a pile of them. And I think that it's just normal human tendency to look at the pile of fails and make it mean something about our skills and capacity. And that's the one thing that I want to help us all shatter. Like I can have this pile of fails that didn't work. And what if I could glean wisdom from them? Like, what if, and this is, I think, you tell me whether this feels true on a consult call, but like one of my goals on a consult call is like, okay, I have this pile of fails, but why didn't it work? If it wasn't my skills, if it wasn't my capacity or how smart I am or how, like, if I'm weak or not, like, if that wasn't it, if that wasn't allowed, it's like multiple choice. That's not allowed to be that's not an answer choice. I wonder if we can get to the root of, I wonder why this is the case. And if I know that, imagine if we can solve that together. I'm curious if that was your experience. Like when you look at the past and you feel deflated or frustrated, to actually
Yes.
decide to do it again.
Yes. And I remember feeling this way and also saying on the consult call, I've I've solved so much since I started with coaching. And I
Mhm.
did. I felt like I really resolved a lot of my feelings as a parent. I felt like I am the best mom for my kids. I really gained a lot. But then I remember saying to you, I just can't figure out basically weekends and eating in the evening after dinner. And I don't want to be, I remember saying that to
Mhm.
you. And I remember also thinking that there's like a magic prescription that you're going to give me to how to solve it. Because that's all I want to solve.
Yeah.
And in the first 6 months, I felt like, well, shit, I'm still doing the same things.
Yeah. Because you wanted the magic prescription. What has been like, because I feel like you did really, like, really did figure this out. So, what was the magic prescription for you? What do you think it
For
was?
me,
Yeah.
the magic prescriptions were um, doing weekly evaluations,
Hmm.
honestly, without judgment. not, and I really feel like I do that now,
Mhm.
doing daily work to build commitment. And then I think the third really key piece that I think you helped me figure out in this chunk of coaching has been the why, sort
Mhm.
of the, not how to fix the weekends and nights, but why. Like,
Yeah.
why are you trying to fill that time with this food? And so the key pieces for me were you teaching about the motivational triad, that
Mhm.
that is just the way your brain automatically fixes stuff.
Yeah.
And then what I was looking for, I think, really, and most of the time, was like being affirmed for all the hard work I do, that I
Mhm.
do deserve pleasure. That was
Mhm.
really resonant from your one of your recent podcasts.
Mhm.
Um, and that, you know, I think sometimes it's just like the desire that I'm doing a great job,
Mhm. Yeah, I
and
think that
somehow
was a
that
really
filled
big,
that need.
especially, yeah, like I think this is so true. Like what we coached on for you, and I think this is so true for so many of us, is we just want to be acknowledged for how much we're doing and recognized for what we're doing. And we forget that like we're supposed to be our number one advocate. I think we kind of forget. And I think because we spend so many years and decades looking for somebody else to recognize us or like acknowledge how amazing we are, whether it's a parent figure or a teacher, or even the A plus on a test is a way to do that. Or your
Yeah.
partner. It's like, I think that what that does over time is it starts to undervalue our own voice. It undervalues the fact that we can recognize ourselves. It's like, yeah, I could, but like we want the partner to do it. And I
Yeah.
think that that only happens because we've spent decades undervaluing our own recognition. But I feel like you tell me when we coached on that piece of like you recognizing you first, like what was the impact of that for you?
I think it's huge because, first, to be able to sort of have it pointed out why I need that recognition, and just that I've had so much positive feedback in my life from others, from getting into medical school, from going to the best residency,
Mhm.
for getting feedback from my patients. Like, that feeds a huge void, but it also created this situation where that's the only way I feel like I can like get feedback and like
Right.
be I need this praise.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, previously I thought the way to solve it was to just tell myself, like, I'm supposed to be the one who thinks I'm great, so I'm just going to tell myself I'm great.
Yeah.
And I would try that, but partly I think I didn't really believe it.
Yeah.
And then I felt like you have said before, like, gimmicky replacements for the
Yeah.
food.
Yeah.
I tried that for a while, but now I feel like I there are things that really do fill the void without
Mhm.
having to say you don't need something to plug in. I
Yeah.
do still want rest, and I
Yeah.
still want to feel like I
Yeah.
deserve something.
Right.
But
And I also think it kind of speaks a little bit to like, oh, I can just tell myself I'm committed and like I'm just gonna
yes,
feel it, that wasn't enough. Just like it's like lip service and like saying the words versus really like believing what you're saying to
yes,
yourself. And I think that
totally.
that it kind of speaks a little bit to what you're talking about, like it being an intellectual exercise, like what you hear in a podcast and what we're talking about coaching versus implementing it. What do you think it was in the Unstoppable group that helped you go from letting it be a learner's exercise to like you implementing what we're talking about?
I mean, there's a lot of good structure within Unstoppable, which and it's not an overwhelming amount.
Mhm.
So for me, the videos were super helpful to start out with. I
Mhm.
just feel like um, implementing it was not so overwhelming. The
Mhm.
amount of material seemed approachable to me,
Mhm.
and I didn't utilize all of it, but I felt like I could find the things that were going to move me forward. And like those are some, like, the phrases that you use that I remember and come back to, like needle movers.
Mhm.
And so I would just kind of cling to those parts that you would present, and I still obviously use those things.
Right.
So I guess that I think the structure of it and like the initial kind of start off,
Oh,
like
the strategy
yeah,
workshop.
like the
Yeah.
workshop. I think that's a great, like, starting point
Hmm.
too, like, um, just to kinda get things kicked off, and
Hmm.
then there's enough structure to keep on when that piece, like the motivational part, maybe kind of fades away a little bit.
Yeah, I think we've even talked about this. Like, I love the I think everyone really loves the strategy workshop because you feel like zinged of motivation. You feel like excited and like you have a plan because we create like your robust strategy on that workshop. But I only like I don't even remember if I say it on the workshop. I think I do. I'm like, this is gonna fade, everybody. The
Yeah,
excitement and
you
motivation is
do.
going to fade. And also, it doesn't matter. We want to expect that it's going to fade and have that also built into the plan, right? And learn
Yeah,
that having a step-by-step process for the daily work and the weekly evaluations is what's going to support you as like committed fuel moving forward. Because there's going to be moments you don't feel like it. There's going to be so
yeah.
many moments that you don't feel like it. But I think having that piece, I think it's super helpful. And I'm curious, even like the accountability of being in a group, like having a weekly coaching call where we're going to be coaching on your brain, on your obstacles. I'm curious, like, what do you think that was that also maybe helped you solve a lot of the obstacles that you had before?
I mean, I think hearing other people's stories is normalizing
Mm,
because sometimes if you're surrounded by people who don't have weight loss as a goal, it can feel a little isolating. And I think that being able to talk about kind of what all of our issues are as working moms, there's so many similarities that I think you kind of generate a feeling of connectedness with the people that are in the group. And you really want everybody in it to succeed, whether it be weight loss or just belief in themselves.
mhm.
I think it like is interesting to see how we all feel towards everybody in the group and
Mm,
then realize that we don't show that kindness to ourselves so often. I feel like
yeah.
um, that's been really noticeable to me in
Yeah.
myself. Like, oh my gosh, if I could just feel that way about myself, this way I feel about everybody else in the group. But I
Yeah.
think the connection is really strong.
Yeah, and I think that I'm so glad that you're mentioning that because I think one of the barriers for someone that is maybe new to coaching or new to like a small group experience, or they feel nervous or they feel like I don't know if I can share, about my life, like, and I'm curious like what would you say to that person that's like, what, I really love the idea of what Priyanka is offering and I love the idea of unstoppable and it all sounds awesome, but like is it for me? Like, I know I'm a working mom, but and they have some nervousness around that. What would you say? What would you say to them about the group?
I think what I would say is that I've only experienced
Mhm,
open support from everybody in the group. And I think that it's a situation that really allows you to feel vulnerable. I mean, I
mhm,
definitely talked about like things that I'm working on in my marriage. That's not super easy to talk about, but
mhm.
I felt very safe in the space of other working moms to talk about it because most of us had similar struggles.
And that was, I think, what was so interesting. So, in the small group, like for anyone that's listening that's unfamiliar, we use Zoom. And I remember somebody would be talking about their marriage or maybe their kid. I think those are the two big ones that feel vulnerable when you're talking about your like role as a mom or your role as a wife. And we're getting coached on it. And in the chat box, how other people would be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I'm not alone in this. Like, oh, that's me too.
Yeah.
And even if somebody didn't think to bring their marriage to coaching or their thoughts about their kids to coaching, they're like, oh, I had no idea that this affected me so much. And you get to really learn from this is to me why I love small group is you get to learn from the wisdom of other people's coaching because you
Yeah.
didn't know that maybe that was something for you too. And that was super impactful. What do you think?
I think that's very true. And I feel like a lot of times when the question was posed, I might think that it wasn't going to address something that I'm dealing with, but almost always by the end of the coaching, I could correlate it with something where it connected with something I'm going through.
Yeah. And I wonder what your thoughts are also for specifically the way the Unstoppable group is designed, whether you felt like, because one of the things that I at least am trying to offer my clients is you get this intimate group where you validate your lived experiences and you really see that you're not alone and your brain is not unique in the struggles that she's having. But also, you get personal, customized coaching from me. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on like the nuanced balance of having both.
Um, I feel that having you coach every week has been what has helped me to progress forward because I think that you specifically can see the areas that I am working on, and whatever questions I have, you can see where the threads of my thinking kind of run through. And I also think that the benefit of group coaching is with the positive aspects that I was just talking about. But there definitely is something about coaching with the same coach every week.
Mhm.
So I find that to be beneficial.
Yeah. And I think that, that's something for everyone to kind of take through the lens of what's going to serve them or not serve them. And I totally understand. I think that, the other piece that I think about with this group is like when it's like this appointment on your calendar, right? Like this weekly coaching call. This is like set in stone, unless like something really, really like significant comes up, you are going to come. I think of this as like a recurring meeting with yourself. A recurring meeting. I know it's with a coach, but it's like a recurring meeting in service of that future that you're trying to create for you on the scale, in your marriage, with your children, any area. It's like this recurring meeting. And I wonder, like, what do you think is the difference between that versus like a friend or an accountability buddy? Like, what do you think is the difference between having that set recurring meeting versus like an accountability buddy? Because we've talked about this. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
So, as you were mentioning it, I remember when you were first describing the group to me, and you said, and this is Wednesday, it's my work day. I'm at work in this hour of time,
I
and
love your printer in the
you
background.
said,
If anyone's watching the video of this, there's a
right.
large printer behind Julie. She's at
Yes, I
work.
get all the papers I need.
Yeah.
But it's funny because you said the expectation is that you not miss more than, I think, 20% of the calls.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, and the program I had done before, all of the calls are recorded, and that a lot of times I would just get to them if I could get to them. And then you would
Mm,
sign up for one on one coaching. And
mhm.
I did notice, like in the program, as I became less engaged, I just wouldn't do it.
Right.
So when you told, and that's the state I was in, I joined Unstoppable. So
Yeah.
then when you said I needed to be at 80% of the calls, I was kind of like, well, crap. I mean, I don't know if I can do that,
Yeah.
but it is important. It's important because I was like you said, it was like a meeting with myself every week. I
Mm.
was carving out that hour of time. And sometimes I wouldn't have thought about anything to coach on, but always after those calls, I felt better
Yes.
and more energized, and like I got the focus of what I was doing. It kept me like in it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
So
keeping
that
you
was
engaged. And I
different.
think that that's part of it's like this it's kind of like this agreement that I want everyone in this group, which is why I think that again a small group is different than other types of containers part of the reason that's the filter is I want the coaching and the group itself will never create your results. And I'm the first on a consult call to tell you that no coaching is like the magic prescription to reaching your ideal weight. You showing up for yourself, you engaging with yourself, and you putting your dreams as a number one priority is how you create results. And my job as your coach is to show you when you're creating obstacles to doing that. So like we want to say, you know what? This really matters to me. Reaching my ideal weight, I can see I've been putting it off. I'm phoning it in. I'm doing the lip service. I can see how that's holding back results. Ready to change that. And I think this is one of those things that it's like a switch to your brain. Like a significant investment, investing in the Unstoppable Group is a significant investment. That's another, like, I'm taking this seriously. Saying I'm
Yeah.
blocking out the time on my calendar, I'm taking this seriously. It's kind of all these little signals of saying, I'm taking this seriously. Unless there's an emergency, this is a recurring meeting with myself. And it really, I mean, you can feel the difference, right? In the texture of the energy.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have anything you want to get coached on, you find something that you get coached on, which is so good.
Yeah, definitely.
If I want you to just like think about as we're kind of wrapping up, I feel like there's like so many things we could keep talking about, but would you imagine like there's someone listening and she's a working mom who wants to lose weight? And I like to describe Unstoppable as like you lose weight without a calculator. That's like the way that I think about what we do. She's like, yeah, that sounds so good. I don't want to do the counting anymore. And I like she thinks of herself as this go-getter who has high, like she has high big dreams for herself, but she's also wanting to take care of everybody else in her life, how will she know that this is the group for her? She's like, nothing I've tried has worked, but like, I really want to create these results. And how will she know if this is for her? What would you say?
If the desire to lose weight is strong, if the solution is not a quick fix, if there is a commitment or willingness to be committed to herself, that this is the place to be able to do that with support.
Mm.
And I think the support piece of it, I have really felt that that has benefited me.
When, like, when you think about that support piece, like, do you feel like that's the coaching piece of it? Is it the community? Is it like, what was it about Unstoppable that you think helped you create that support for yourself that maybe you didn't have before?
I think that the difference for me has been the coaching
Mhm.
because, you know, and specifically the way that you coach
Mm.
has been what the difference has been for me because I've had the other parts of it. And also, like you said, there are layers in coaching. And I've been getting through layers, but there was something really meaningful about knowing that you wanted the same thing I wanted and that you were going to help me see what it was that I was looking for and ask the questions in a way that pushed me,
Mhm.
um, that moved me forward. I remember you would, in some of like the Slack coaching, you would say, you would ask me a question and I would really want to respond with like an almost sarcastic comment because I
Mhm.
thought like, well, I don't know, or I ate it because I like that. But it was helpful because your
Yeah.
additional questions made me really think,
Yeah.
and it helped me figure out what I was looking for.
Yeah, I think that that's so true. And what you're describing, it's not uncommon, right? Like the sarcastic or like the desire to be like, I don't know. I think that that only comes, you tell me whether this is true for you, but at least for me, it's like the only reason I ever want to do that is because I've never really answered the question.
Yes,
And so it's a little protective. It's like, duh, Priyanka, if I knew that, like I wouldn't be
right,
here. But we've never actually answered the question, right? Which is why I think I mean, you tell me, what does that feel true to you?
very. And I think it was almost like annoyance at
Yeah.
I I know that it's a question, but I still haven't figured it out. And like,
Right.
can't you just tell me the answer? That's what the I
Yes.
was like, can't you just tell me the answer?
Yes, and I
But
think that that's like I share this. I don't even know if I've said this on the podcast, but like I'm not in the business of wanting my clients to like me or love me. I'm like I'm just here to help you get results. And I think that in the group we have an incredible amount of love and fun, but I push you
yeah,
when you're not asking the questions that you need to be asking. And I think that it's a fun place for me to be in as your coach because whenever and we've talked about this in the group before, but I can see all of my clients, every single person in this group, and I can see them completely at their goal, completely whole, done and done. Right?
yeah,
Whenever anybody's getting coached, you're like, oh my gosh, they're so capable. They're not even seeing how capable they are.
yeah,
And we feel that as just 100% truth. I think that what we get to do and what I offer as a coach is when you're not believing in yourself, when you're having wobble on something, I get to offer that belief, that unconditional belief to you, and you just get to borrow it. It's like,
yeah,
oh, and it's not make believe, it's just 100% real because you've experienced it for other people in the group,
definitely. Yeah,
right? Which is,
yeah.
I think, the best thing. And so we get to have fun, and also you don't have to like me. There's probably like I feel like there's definitely been some pointed coaching. I mean, on occasion, it's not every week, but like, we really get serious sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you remember any specific instances for you where you're like, I cannot believe, like where you got mad at me? You can just tell me because I'm like,
I
no, I'm so
I
curious.
don't remember the specifics of the questioning, but I remember the result. So I
Yeah.
think that it was kind of focused on like snacking,
Hmm.
and I think just really really emphatically claiming that the reason that I eat flamin' hots at night is because I just like them. But
Yeah.
what sort of the end result was that I was looking for connection with
Hmm.
my husband.
Can
Like,
you believe that?
no, no, like
Yeah.
really that I really thought it was about the Flamin' Hots.
You thought it was about the Flamin' Hots, and did you get a little mad at me when I was like, "No, it's not the
Yes,
Flamin'
I was
Hots."
annoyed. I was
Yes.
annoyed. Yes,
Yes.
I was like, "Do you know how good they are?" And I'm pretty sure it's just the food.
Yeah. I wonder, and okay, so here's what I want to say though. So there are two types of clients that will come into the same exact coaching. And what I want to offer to you, and I want you to see what you did. You got annoyed because I asked you some questions, and then you took that annoyance and you're like, but like, let me just sit with this. And you allowed yourself to stay curious. So I wonder whether you even got curious about your annoyance, curious, like, I wonder why Priyanka's even asking. Like maybe she must be seeing something that I'm not seeing. Like you followed some thread where you got to the other side, which let you see, oh, this is actually about you wanting to connect with your husband. And I think, and I've done this as a client, I've done it both ways where I feel the annoyance and then that's kind of the end of it. And you're like, okay, done.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like, you know what I'm saying? So I'm curious whether you can feel the difference where you can feel annoyed with your coach. I'm telling you, if you work with me, you might not love me all the time. I'm going to ask you hard questions. And also, if you take that thread and you follow it all the way through, like really seeing the impact of that.
I knew the goal of the
Mm,
questions was to get me to think more.
yeah.
So I kind of just let the annoyance not be in the way, but it was
Mhm.
still there.
Yes. And you know what's interesting? Because I can sometimes tell on a call, I can like feel, see a little shift happening. And my thought as your coach is like, oh, we're hitting something interesting. I wonder what it is. Which I think is, again, having, I think, an intimate room like this where we get to coach on the thread. It doesn't all get resolved on one coaching call. It'll come up again a few weeks later and then a few weeks later. And then like, remember back in December or back in
Yeah,
March, whenever it was, like, remember we talked about this, and like you get to see when you follow the thread, the growth of that. I love that so much. So what else? Anything else that you want to share, Julie, about your experience in the group, how you felt about it? Anything that you feel like sharing? Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I feel like the reference to this as like a coaching container
Mhm.
is a really accurate description. And there are a few podcasts that I listen to of yours that I think really help supplement all that you coach
Mm.
on. And I go back to them often. But I think the main thing that I would say is that, you know, the way that you emphasize the fuel that you use to lose weight and really liking the way that you're choosing to lose weight and being able to sort of choose it, love it, and then evaluate it is for me has been a really solid key to not only being successful, but also feeling supported and good during the process. And I really feel like the way that you've organized the program just is very supportive um, to getting things done. So
Yeah. And and I want anyone that's listening to know that, and Julie, you can kind of speak to this, is you don't have to know how to do any of this before you join. Which is so, I think, again, like high achievers, like, oh, like let me I have to like learn the homework first and become the
yeah,
A+ student, and then I'll join the group. As opposed to like, no, you're going to get the step by step on exactly how to do each thing when you're in the group with support, which I just think is, it's just so much better rather than slowing you down. You just get to speed
yeah,
up so much earlier.
yep. I think that you kind of knowing me all through that process is what helped me get to this point. So so yeah, I feel like you can know nothing and totally be supported.
Absolutely. So good. Julie, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank
podcast and
you.
sharing your story. And I feel like there's so many more things that we could talk about. I think that it's important to share the real ups and downs, the real, like what happens in coaching. And I'm always going to be the first to say that coaching is not going to be the magic prescription, but truly I do think that it creates magic results when you know how to take in coaching, when you're willing to put yourself in a room, invest in yourself with money and time. It just is showing that you're willing to do the work, to take it seriously, because it takes that. It's not about it taking more time or more effort. It's just redirecting your brain to prioritizing this.
Yep.
And then like you get to decide, do you want that? And then how does it show up, right? As a mom now, as a physician, as a wife, it just levels everything up.
Yeah, it does.
So good, Julie. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story.
Thank you.